evening sun was slowly sinking beyond the skyline, painting the tall glass buildings in shades of gold and orange. In the heart of the city, a luxurious restaurant stood proud, its entrance glowing with warm lights. It's a kind of place where the valet wore crisp uniforms and every customer stepped out of expensive cars. Inside, the air smelled of fresh bread, herbs, and the faint sweetness of desserts being prepared in the kitchen. Soft piano music floated through the air, mixing with the quiet chatter of people dressed in their best clothes at a corner table. By the window, Mr. Grant sat with his family. He was a tall, confident man in his early 50s, wearing a dark suit that looked like it came straight from a high-end tailor. To the world, he was a billionaire businessman, the owner of several successful companies. To his daughter Lily, he was simply Dad. Lily, only 10 years old, had a curious mind and a heart far bigger than her small frame. She had her mother's gentle smile, and when she laughed, it had a way of making even the most serious person smile back. That night, Mr. Grant was busy checking his phone. It wasn't unusual business didn't stop just because it was dinner time. His wife, a graceful woman in a light blue dress, was quietly looking over the menu, deciding what to order. Lily, however, wasn't thinking about food. Her eyes had drifted to the large glass window beside their table, which gave her a clear view of the street outside. It was then that she noticed. An elderly woman sat alone on a bench just across the road, not far from the restaurant's entrance. She wore an old brown coat, slightly torn at the sleeves, and her shoes looked worn out. Her hair was gray and tied in a simple bun. From where Lily sat, she could see the woman's tired face. Her eyes were fixed on the restaurant window, as though she were watching the people inside enjoy their meals. Lily's heart sank. The woman didn't look angry or bitter. She looked hungry. Her thin hands were clasped together. Every now and then she would glance down at the bag beside her as if checking to see if she had anything inside. But she never pulled anything. Out to eat. Lily turned to her father. "Dad," she said softly, so her voice didn't interrupt the gentle atmosphere of the restaurant. "HM." Mr. Grant replied without looking up, his fingers still moving across his phone screen. "Do you see that lady outside?" Lily pointed towards the window. Her father gave the quickest glance but returned his attention to his phone. "I guess I see her?" "Why?" Lily hesitated. "She looks like she hasn't eaten in a while. Can we invite her to have dinner with us?" This time Mr. Grant looked up, blinking as if her request caught him off guard. "Invite her? Inside here?" "Yes," Lily said with a small nod. "Why not?" Mr. Grant leaned back slightly, still processing the idea. "Lily, this is a private dinner." Before he could finish, another business call came through. He lifted the phone to his ear, muttering a quick, "Excuse me," before answering. His tone changed immediately to the confident, commanding voice he used for work. Lily's small hands twisted in her lap. She glanced at her mother, who gave her an encouraging smile but didn't say anything. Taking a deep breath, Lily decided she didn't need permission to be kind. She slid out of her chair quietly, moving past the other tables with her small steps. The waiter at the door looked a little surprised as she walked outside, but he didn't stop her. The air outside was cooler than it had been inside the warm restaurant. Lily crossed the short distance to the bench where the woman sat. Up close, she could see that the woman's face had fine lines etched by years of life. But her eyes, a soft shade of blue, still held warmth. "Hello?" Lily said gently, standing just a step away so she wouldn't startle her. The woman turned, her expression changing from surprise to curiosity. "Hello, dear," she replied, her voice low and a little raspy. "My name is Lily," the young girl said with a bright smile. "I'm having dinner with my family inside, and I was wondering if you'd like to join us." The woman blinked, clearly not expecting such an offer. "Join you?" she asked slowly, almost as if she wasn't sure she heard correctly. "Yes," Lily nodded. "You can sit with us and eat. It's warm inside, and the food is really good." The woman's eyes softened, but she looked down at her coat and shoes. "Sweetheart, I don't think I'm dressed for a place like that. And I don't want to trouble anyone." "It's not trouble," Lily insisted, her voice sincere. "Please, I'd really like it if you came." For a moment, the woman hesitated. Then she sighed, a small smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "You have a kind heart," she said quietly. "All right, I'll come." Lily's smile grew wide. She reached out her small hand, and after a second, the woman took it. When they walked back inside, the warm air and smell of freshly baked bread wrapped around them. A few diners turned their heads, their expressions mixed, some surprised, some curious. The hostess at the door gave Lily a questioning look, but the girl simply said, "She's with us," and kept walking at their table. Mrs. Grant raised her eyebrows but didn't look upset. Mr. Grant, who had just ended his call, looked up and froze for a second, seeing the elderly woman holding his daughter's hand. "This is Mrs. Harris," Lily said cheerfully, introducing her as though they were already friends. "She's going to have dinner with us." "Duh." Mr. Grant's gaze shifted between his daughter and the woman. Mrs. Harris gave him a polite nod. Her shoulders slightly tense. "I see," Mr. Grant said slowly, his face unreadable. The waiter appeared, ready to hand over menus, but paused when he saw the new guest. Mr. Grant gave a small nod, allowing them to set an extra place at the table. Mrs. Harris sat down carefully, almost as if she were afraid of damaging the chair. She kept her hands in her lap, glancing around at the elegant room and the polished silverware. Lily, noticing her nervousness, poured her a glass of water and offered her a bread roll from the basket in the center of the table. "Thank you," Mrs. Harris whispered, taking the bread in her hands as though it were something precious. "Mr.?" Grant didn't say much, but his eyes stayed on the two of them, watching the way Lily smiled and chatted. He didn't yet know that this small act of kindness was about to change not just the woman's evening, but her entire life. Mrs. Harris sat quietly, her back straight, hands still folded neatly in her lap. It had been a long time since she had sat at such a fine table. Crisp white tablecloth, the shining silver forks and knives, the crystal water glasses, everything felt too grand, as if she had somehow stepped into a world that wasn't hers. She glanced briefly at Mr. Grant, unsure of how he felt about her being there. His face was calm but unreadable, the kind of expression that made you wonder if he was thinking deeply or simply observing. Lily, however, seemed completely at ease, as though bringing a stranger to dinner was the most natural thing in the world. "Dad," Lily said cheerfully, "Mrs. Harris hasn't had dinner yet. Can we order for her first?" The question seemed to break whatever quiet tension had settled between them. Mr. Grant placed his phone face down on the table and gave a small nod. "Of course," he said. His voice was measured, but not unkind. The waiter, sensing that it was safe to proceed, stepped forward with a polite smile. "Would you like to see the menu, ma'am?" Mrs. Harris hesitated, her eyes moving over the elegant card. The names of the dishes were fancy, many of them unfamiliar. She didn't want to choose something too expensive, even though she knew this was already an unusual situation. I'm fine with something simple," she said softly, looking up at the waiter. "Maybe some soup and bread?" Mr. Grant leaned forward slightly. "Mrs. Harris, tonight is not a night for simple," he said. "Order whatever you'd like. The best thing here, if you ask me, is the roasted salmon, or perhaps the slow-cooked lamb. And don't forget dessert. Their chocolate soufflé is famous." Lily grinned. "The soufflé is the best part," she added. Mrs. Harris's lips curved into a small smile. "All right, maybe the salmon then," she said gently. "Thank you." The waiter wrote it down and disappeared toward the kitchen. For a moment, silence settled again, but it wasn't as heavy as before. Lily began telling Mrs. Harris about her school, her friends, and how she had recently started learning the piano. Mrs. Harris listened closely, her eyes crinkling with warmth. She asked Lily questions about her favorite songs and whether she liked playing in front of people. "I get nervous," Lily admitted. "But Mom says everyone gets nervous before doing something important." "That's true," Mrs. Harris replied. "And sometimes the most important things are the ones we feel nervous about." Mr. Grant listened to their exchange quietly. Something about Mrs. Harris's voice reminded him of the women in his old neighborhood's strong, gentle voices that carried wisdom from years of life. He sipped his water, still curious about how his daughter had decided to invite her. When the bread arrived, Lily quickly offered Mrs. Harris another piece. "These are fresh from the oven," she said proudly, as if she had baked them herself. Mrs. Harris took the bread gratefully. "I can smell it," she said, closing her eyes for a brief second. "It's been a long time since I've had fresh bread." Lily tilted her head. "Do you live far from here?" she asked. Mrs. Harris hesitated. She didn't want to make the table uncomfortable with her truth, but she also didn't want to lie to a child who had shown her such kindness. "Not too far," she answered softly. "I've been staying at a shelter for a while. Before that, I had a little apartment, but I couldn't keep it. Things have been hard these last few years." Mrs. Grant reached for her glass of water, her eyes meeting her husband's for a moment. Mr. Grant didn't interrupt. Instead, he leaned back. Watching his daughter's reaction, "I'm sorry things have been hard," Lily said with genuine sadness in her voice. "But I'm glad you came here tonight." Mrs. Harris's smile returned, a little stronger this time. "So am I, dear." The main dishes arrived soon after, filling the air with rich, comforting smells. The salmon was plated beautifully with roasted vegetables on the side. Mrs. Harris stared at it for a moment, almost hesitant to touch it. "Go ahead," Mr. Grant said with a small wave of his hand. "It's best when it's hot." She picked up her fork and took the first bite. Her eyes widened slightly as she tasted the tender fish, the flavors of herbs and butter melting together. This is wonderful," she said softly. Lily beamed. "Told you." As they ate, the conversation slowly opened up. Mrs. Harris shared small pieces of her life, how she used to work in an office, how she enjoyed reading mystery novels, and how she once dreamed of traveling to Italy. Didn't speak about her hardships for too long, but each sentence carried hints of the resilience that had kept her moving forward. Mr. Grant, still reserved, asked a few gentle questions. "What kind of work did you do in your office job?" "I was a receptionist for many years," she replied. "I enjoyed meeting people and helping them, but when the company downsized, I was let go. Finding new work at my age wasn't easy." Grant nodded slowly, his mind already turning over possibilities. He didn't say much, but his gaze toward her had softened. Lily, noticing her father's change in expression, felt hopeful. She didn't understand all of her father's business decisions, but she knew one thing: when something touched his heart, he acted. The dessert menu came, and Lily immediately pointed to the chocolate souffle. "We have to get one for Mrs. Harris. She'll love it." Mrs. Harris laughed lightly. "All right, just one," she agreed. When the souffle arrived, its warm chocolate center oozing slightly when the spoon broke into it, Mrs. Harris took a bite and closed her eyes in delight. "I think you might be right, Lily," she said. "This might be the best part." By the time the plates were cleared, the awkwardness that had been there at the beginning had completely disappeared. The table felt warmer, almost like a small circle of friends rather than a billionaire's family. And a stranger? Still, Mrs. Harris began to fidget slightly, glancing at the time. "I should probably let you get back to your evening," she said softly. "I don't want to take up too much of your time." Before she could stand, Mr. Grant spoke for the first time in a tone that was both firm and kind. "Mrs. Harris, there's no rush. We invited you here to enjoy a meal, and I hope you have." Her eyes softened, and she gave him a grateful nod. "I have, more than you know." As the bill was quietly handled by Mr. Grant, Lily leaned toward her father and whispered, "I'm glad you didn't say no." He glanced at her, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "So am I," he replied, None of them knew it. But tonight was only the beginning of a story that would change more than just one life. The clinking of cutlery had quieted down now. Most of the other diners were lost in their own conversations, but at the Grant family's table, something different was happening. The evening had started with polite smiles and a little awkwardness, but now the air felt softer, warmer. Mr. Grant leaned forward, resting his elbows lightly on the table. His gaze was on Mrs. Harris, not in the cold, analytical way he often studied people, but with genuine interest. "Mrs. Harris," he began, "you mentioned earlier that you worked as a receptionist. How long did you do that?" Mrs. Harris placed her hands neatly in her lap before answering. "Nearly 20 years. I started when my son was little. It was steady work, and I liked greeting people, answering calls, keeping the office organized. I took pride in my job." "What happened? After the downsizing?" Mr. Grant asked gently. She gave a small shrug. "I tried to find something else, but jobs that needed my skills. They didn't come by often. And when they did, there were younger candidates with more energy, more computer skills. I had savings for a while, but then my husband got sick. Medical bills. They take away more than money. After he passed, I sold most of my things to pay off debts. Eventually, I had to leave my apartment. The shelter is, well, it's safe enough. But it's not the same as having a place to call your own." Lily's eyes were wide as she listened. She had never thought about how quickly someone's life could change. To her, home was something she could take for granted: her bed, her toys, her piano lessons. "I'm sorry you went through all that," Mrs. Grant said quietly. Mrs. Harris smiled faintly. "Life is what it is. But I try to be thankful for the small blessings, like a warm meal on a cold night." She gave Lily a fond look, and a young lady with a kind heart. Lily blushed and ducked her head, fiddling with her napkin. Mr. Grant didn't speak right away. He sat back, thinking. His mind was always moving, weighing decisions, measuring risks, spotting opportunities. But tonight the opportunity wasn't about profit. It was about something far more human. Finally he said, "Mrs. Harris, if you could work again, what would you want to do?" The question seemed to surprise her. She thought for a moment. "I'd like to do something where I can interact with people. I'm not as fast with computers as some, but I learn quickly if someone is patient enough to teach me. I just want to feel useful again." Mr. Grant nodded slowly, storing the information away like a puzzle piece that might fit somewhere soon. The waiter returned with fresh coffee for the adults and warm milk for Lily. They all sat for a moment, sipping quietly. Then, breaking the pause, Lily asked, "Dad, do you remember when you told me that we should always help if we can?" Mr. Grant looked at her over the rim of his cup. "I do." Lily tilted her head toward Mrs. Harris. "Well, we can, right?" Her innocence made Mrs. Grant smile, but she also glanced at her husband, curious to see how he would respond. Mr. Grant set his coffee cup down. "Yes, we can," he said simply. Mrs. Harris looked between them, puzzled. "I'm sorry. I don't mean to intrude on your evening any more than I already have. You've been incredibly kind." "You haven't intruded," Mr. Grant said firmly. "You've reminded me of something important. When I was young, I didn't have much either. Mother worked 2 jobs, and sometimes dinner was just bread and tea. But there were people, strangers, who stepped in at the right moments. They didn't know me well, but their kindness made a difference. I never forgot that." Mrs. Harris's eyes softened. "It's not easy to remember that kind of kindness when life gets busy." "That's true," he agreed. "But my daughter reminded me tonight." He gave Lily a small smile. "And maybe it's my turn to return the favor." Mrs. Harris blinked, unsure of what he meant. He reached into the inside pocket of his suit jacket and pulled out a simple white business card. Sliding it across the table, he said, "This is my office number. Tomorrow morning I'd like you to come by. I think I might have a position for you at one of my companies. We need someone with a good manner for people and strong organization skills. It's not charity. It's a job if you want it." For a second, Mrs. Harris just stared at the card, then her eyes filled with tears, though she quickly blinked them back. "Mr. Grant, I don't know what to say." "Say you'll come by," he replied calmly. "We'll see if it works out. If not, I'll help you find something that Does? Lily's face lit up. See? I told you Dad could help. Mrs. Harris let out a shaky laugh. You did, didn't you? She tucked the card carefully into her coat pocket, as though it were something fragile. The waiter came to clear the table, and Mr. Grant asked for the check. Mrs. Harris instinctively reached for her old handbag, but Mr. Grant stopped her with a simple shake of his head. Tonight's on us. When they stepped out into the cool night air, the city lights glittered against the dark sky. The valet brought around the Grant's sleek black car. Mrs. Harris stood on the sidewalk, holding her coat closed. I'll walk you back to the shelter, Mr. Grant offered. But Mrs. Harris shook her head gently. You've done more than enough already, she said, and I'm quite used to walking. But thank you, not just for dinner, but for making me feel human again. That last line stayed with Mr. Grant. He didn't reply with a grand speech. He simply nodded, understanding. More than words could express. Lily stepped forward and hugged Mrs. Harris tightly. See you tomorrow, she said with a grin. Mrs. Harris patted her back. See you tomorrow, dear. Yes. The car pulled away. Lily watched through the rear window until Mrs. Harris disappeared from view. She turned back to her father. You're going to give her the job, right? We'll see if she's the right fit, he said, but his tone carried a hint of certainty. Mrs. Grant smiled knowingly. I think you already know the answer. Mr. Grant didn't reply, but deep down, he knew she was right. Something about Mrs. Harris's quiet dignity and resilience had touched him. He suspected that in helping her. He might just be giving himself something he didn't even know he needed, a reminder of what really mattered. The next morning, the city was already alive with movement, buses rumbling past, people hurrying to work and shopkeepers opening their doors. In a quieter part of town, Mrs. Harris stood outside a tall glass building with Mr. Grant's company. Name in silver letters above the entrance. She clutched her old handbag close to her. The business card from last night tucked safely inside. Her coat was brushed clean, her hair tied neatly in a bun. She'd even polished her shoes as best she could. She was nervous, but she had promised Lily she would come. The security guard at the front desk looked up as she walked in. Good morning. Mom, how can I help you? I'm here to see Mr. Grant, she said, her voice steady even though her heart was beating fast. The guard glanced at a list, then nodded. He's expecting you. Take the elevator to the 12th floor. She stepped into the elevator, watching the numbers climb higher and higher. When the doors opened, she was greeted by a warm smile from a young receptionist. Mrs. Harris. Welcome, Mr. Grant. We'll see you now. Inside the office, the billionaire himself stood by the window looking out over the city. When he turned to face her, his expression was calm but not distant, a look that told her he had been waiting for this meeting. Good morning, Mrs. Harris, he said, gesturing toward a chair. Please, sit. She took the seat, folding her hands neatly in her lap. I wanted to thank you for coming, he continued. I thought about what you told me last night. You have experience, you know how to work with people, and your reliable qualities that are hard to find these days. I can't promise this will be the perfect fit, but I'd like to offer you a trial position as a receptionist here at one of my smaller offices. If it works out, it could become permanent. Mrs. Harris's eyes widened. That's more than I expected. I don't even know how to thank you. By showing up and doing your best, Mr. Grant said simply. She smiled, a little overwhelmed. I can do that. He stood and handed her a folder with the job details. You'll start Monday. In the meantime, there's a small advance in here to help you prepare clothes, transportation, whatever you need. She hesitated before taking it. You really don't have to, I do, he interrupted gently. It's part of making sure you succeed. Mrs. Harris left the building with the folder clutched in her hands. She walked to a nearby store and, for the first time in years, bought herself a new blouse and shoes. It wasn't much, but it made her feel ready to face this new chapter. That evening, she sat on her small bed at the shelter, reading through the job details again. She could hardly believe that just a day ago, she'd been sitting on a cold bench outside a restaurant, watching other people eat. And now, she was only days away from starting work again. Meanwhile, at the Grant family's home, Lily was telling. Her mother all about school, but she kept slipping in questions about Mrs. Harris. "Do you think she'd like her new job?" Lily asked. "I think she will," Mrs. Grant replied, smiling. "But more importantly, I think she'd like having a reason to wake up every morning and feel proud." When Mr. Grant came home later, Lily rushed to greet him. "Did she come?" "She came," he said with a small smile. "She starts Monday." Lily clapped her hands. "I knew she would." Mr. Grant looked at his daughter for a moment, realizing that her simple act of kindness had started all of this. "You know," he said, "you might have changed her life." "You helped," Lily replied. "We both did." Monday morning came quickly. Mrs. Harris woke up early, dressed in her new blouse and shoes, and made her way to the office. The building was busy, but she found her desk near the entrance and settled in. The phone began to ring, and she answered it with a warm, professional tone that came back to her like muscle memory. She greeted visitors, sorted mail, and kept the reception area tidy by the end of the day. Her supervisor, a kind woman named Rachel, told her she was doing a great job. "It's like you've been here for years," Rachel said with a smile. Mrs. Harris felt a quiet pride she hadn't felt in a long time. Weeks passed, and Mrs. Harris grew more confident in her role. She learned the computer system, remembered regular clients by name, and always had a friendly word for everyone who walked through the door. Her small paychecks allowed her to rent a modest apartment near the office, and she left the shelter behind. One Friday afternoon, Mr. Grant visited her office. He walked in quietly, observing her greet a visitor with a bright smile and help them find the right department. When the visitor left, she turned and noticed him. "Mr. Grant," she said warmly. "What a surprise. I just came to see how you're doing," he said. "I'm doing well," she replied. "Better than I have in years." "Thank you again for giving me this chance." "You earned it," he said simply. "And from what I hear, the clients love you." She laughed. "I just try to make people feel welcome." "That's exactly why you're here," he said, that weekend. Mr. Grant took his family back to the same restaurant where they had met Mrs. Harris, but this time there was no cold bench outside, no tired figure watching through the window. Instead, Mrs. Harris was in her own home, enjoying a home-cooked meal and calling her son, telling him all about how life was starting to look brighter. Lily, sitting across from her father at the restaurant, asked, "Do you think she's happy?" "Now, I think she's on her way," Mr. Grant replied. "Happiness doesn't always happen overnight, but she has a roof over her head, work she enjoys, and people who care about her. That's a good start." Lily smiled. "I'm glad." We invited her that night. Mr. Grant looked at his daughter, realizing again that her small, fearless act of kindness had set everything in motion. "So am I," he said quietly. The piano in the corner began to play a soft, familiar tune, and for a moment the world outside seemed to fade away. Inside it was just a father, a mother, and a daughter, and somewhere across town, a woman whose life had been changed forever because one little girl saw her, truly saw her, when no one else did. The weeks that followed felt like the gentle opening of a new door. Mrs. Harris stepped through it carefully at first, then with growing confidence. Each morning she left her small apartment a few minutes early so she could walk past the flower shop near the office. She liked to look at the fresh blooms in the window. One day, after her second paycheck, she went inside and bought a tiny potted plant for her desk. It had bright green leaves and a white ceramic pot she set it next to. The phone and smiled every time she saw it. It was a small thing, but it made the place feel like hers. Her days fell into a steady rhythm. She greeted visitors with a warm good morning, learned the names of delivery drivers, and remembered which clients preferred tea instead of coffee. She printed schedules, helped with meeting rooms, and made the front area calm even during busy hours. When a nervous young applicant arrived for an interview one afternoon, she offered him water and a kind word. "You already did a brave thing by showing up," she told him. "Now breathe. Speak slowly. You'll do fine." He gave her a grateful smile and later returned to tell her he got the job. Moments like that reminded her of the work she had loved long ago. On Friday evenings, she took a short bus ride back to the neighborhood where everything had changed for her. The restaurant still glowed warmly behind its large windows. She didn't stop there every time, but when she did, she would sit on the same bench where Lily first saw her. Now she did not sit there with an empty stomach or a heavy heart. She sat with a quiet sense of peace. Sometimes she brought 2 sandwiches from a small deli around the corner. If she saw someone who looked tired or worried, she would ask if they wanted to share a meal. She never forced a conversation. She just listened. She knew how much listening could mean. At home, the little apartment slowly grew into a place that felt safe. With her first month's savings, she bought a second-hand lamp that cast a soft, warm light across the room. With her next paycheck, she found simple curtains that matched the lamp. She placed a framed photo of her late husband on the shelf and said goodnight to him each evening. "I found my place again," she would whisper. "You'd be proud." She also called her son more often. He'd lived in another city with his family and had worried about her during the hard years. For a while, she had kept the worst of it from him to avoid being a burden. Now her voice was lighter when they spoke. "I'm working again," she told him. "A kind man gave me a chance." Her son wanted to visit, and she told him to wait a few weeks so she could get fully settled. "I want you to see me standing strong," she said, with a smile he could hear through the phone at the office. Her supervisor, Rachel, noticed the change not only in the reception area, but also in the mood of visitors. "People leave this desk feeling calm," Rachel told her one afternoon. "That's not common, you know. You're good at this." Mrs. Harris thanked her, feeling a quiet pride bloom inside her like that little plant on the desk. Lily came to visit one day after school. She walked in holding a tin of cookies she had baked with her mother. "I made these for your office," she said, placing the tin on Mrs. Harris's desk. The girl's eyes lit up when she saw the plant. "It looks happy here," she said. "It keeps me company," Mrs. Harris replied. "Just like you did that night." They sat together for a few minutes, and Lily asked questions about the phones, the computer, the big meetings. Mrs. Harris answered each one, letting Lily try the headsets muted, of course, and teaching her how to sort mail by department. Staff members came by to say hello. Most of them already knew the story of how the family met Mrs. Harris, at least in simple form. No one treated it like a tale of charity. They treated it like a story of kindness that had shown up at the right time. News of the dinner did not spread at once. It drifted slowly, like a small ripple that grew wider as it moved. A waiter from that evening told a friend, who wrote a short post online about a wealthy man who surprised everyone by acting with quiet respect. The post was not filled with grand details, only a few lines about a father, a daughter, and a woman who needed a kind hand. People shared it because it felt gentle and true. Soon, a local reporter asked if he could speak with Mr. Grant and Mrs. Harris. Mr. Grant did not chase attention, but he agreed. The interview was simple. The reporter asked why he had said yes to his daughter, and Mr. Grant gave a small, honest smile. "My daughter asked, and I listened," he said. "I remembered people who helped me when I had little. One meal can change someone's day. A job can change someone's life." Mrs. Harris sat beside him, hands folded in her lap, calm and steady. She did not tell a dramatic story. She told the truth. "They invited me to sit down," she said. "They looked at me like a person. That made me stronger." The article was short, respectful, and kind. It traveled far beyond the city. People did not argue about it. They simply felt encouraged. A teacher in another town read it to her class and asked the students to bring one small act of kindness to school the following week. A cafe owner started a suspended meal board where customers could buy a meal in advance for someone who needed it. A small business created a program to hire older workers who had trouble finding jobs. They sent a thank you note to Mr. Grant's office for the inspiration. Mr. Grant noticed something changing within his companies. He asked his HR leaders to review open roles with a new lens. Could they train for certain skills instead of requiring them up front? Could they offer short refresh courses for people returning to work after a long break? Rachel helped design a simple training week for reception and front desk roles. They called it Welcome Back Week. The name made people smile. When Welcome Back Week began for the first group, Mrs. Harris volunteered to greet the participants and show them around. "I was nervous on my first day too," she told them. "But you belong here. It will get easier, one step at a time." She taught small tips that didn't appear in manuals. Write people's names down when you hear them. Use their name once before they leave. It makes them feel seen. The group thanked her with a round of soft applause that made her cheeks warm with joy. A month later, her son finally visited with his wife and their little boy. They knocked on her apartment door on a bright Saturday morning. When she opened it, her grandson rushed forward with open arms, and she lifted him carefully, laughing. They sat at her small table, ate pastries from the bakery downstairs, and looked around her space. "It's simple and perfect," her son said, tracing the edge of the lamp with his fingers. "It feels like you." She showed them the plant and told them how it made the office feel calm. She told the story of the dinner from the beginning, not leaving out the parts that hurt, but also not letting those parts be the only truth. By the end, her daughter-in-law had tears in her eyes. "Some people talk about kindness," she said, quietly. "Some people do it." Later that afternoon, they visited the office so the family could see where she worked. The lobby felt tall and shiny next to her grandson's small steps. When they arrived at the desk, Mrs. Harris placed her hands on the counter for a second and breathed in. "This is where I found my way back," she said. Her grandson pressed a hand to the clear surface and grinned at his reflection. Mrs. Harris laughed and scooped him up, pointing out the plant, the mail slots, and the bowl of mints she kept for visitors. On a sunny evening not long after, the Grants invited Mrs. Harris to their home for a simple dinner. The atmosphere was relaxed. Lily set the table with care and asked if she could play a short song on the piano after dessert. Everyone agreed. When she finished the piece, the last note hung in the air like a small ribbon of light. "Beautiful," Mrs. Harris said, clapping. "Softly, you make the room feel peaceful." Lily looked pleased. "You helped me feel brave," she said. "I wanted to play for you." Before she left, Mrs. Harris handed Lily a small envelope. Inside was a handwritten note on neat stationery. The letters were careful and even. "Dear Lily," it read, "thank you for seeing me. You did not pass me by. You asked me to join you. You set everything else in motion. I will carry this gift for the rest of my life." Lily read it twice, then hugged her. Time continued in gentle steps. The bench outside the restaurant was still there, and sometimes Mrs. Harris sat on it for a moment as the sun went down. But the meaning of that place had changed for her. It was no longer a symbol of quiet hunger. It was a signpost in her story, the point where the path turned. One evening, she noticed a middle-aged man sitting on the bench with a faraway look in his eyes. She sat beside him, leaving space, and waited a minute before speaking. "Ate a good night for warm soup," she said softly. He startled, then nodded, without meeting her gaze. She stood and pointed toward the small deli, then paused. "Would you like to walk with me?" Hesitated, then rose to his feet. Inside the deli, they ordered 2 bowls and sat by the window. She did not ask for details. She simply shared the meal and listened to whatever words he wanted to offer. When they finished, she wrote her name and a phone number on a napkin. "If you need a friendly voice, call," she said. He took the napkin and thanked her, understood that not every story could be solved in an hour, but a meal could make the next hour easier. Sometimes that was enough to keep going. A reporter who had interviewed Mr. Grant wrote a small follow-up months later. It was not